This is the Red Komodo. The 6K resolution for $6,000 Red camera with a global shutter and Red RAW recording that all fits in the palm of your hand. Well, sort of.
Indy, Mogul.
What's cooking, everybody? I'm your host, Dave Mays, and this is my first gear review on Indy Mogul. If gear reviews are your thing, or you're into filmmaking tips and tutorials, then make sure to subscribe down below and enable that bell notification. Now, the Red Komodo has been a long-awaited camera for Red fanboys and girls out there, and it's really exciting that this camera is finally available to hold. But quick disclaimer, the camera that we have, the white Stormtrooper model, is still considered a beta unit running beta software. So everything that we are talking about in this video is subject to change with production firmware. I know for myself, I've been waiting a long time to play with this camera, and let me just tell you, after having it for 3 to 4 days, I really like this camera. It's really nice. So let's get up to speed on the specs of this amazing new camera from Red. The Red Komodo is a 6K Super 35 global shutter sensor camera that can shoot a variety of frame rates and resolutions. The maximum frame rate for 6K is 40 frames per second, and the maximum frame rate for 2K is 120 frames per second. Many frame rates can happen at other resolutions as well, and we will list that here on the screen. Feel free to pause the video and see a list of everything now. To not sacrifice image quality, Red chooses to crop in on the sensor every time you lower the resolution. If you're new to Red, this may seem alarming, but if you're not, you'll know this is how Red has been doing things since forever. Basically, what's happening is every time you go down in resolution, it's actually cropping in on the sensor for that particular window of resolution. That way you're not getting any line skipping or pixel binning or any of that crappy stuff that happens on DSLR cameras. You get the full resolution, 1:1 pixel, whatever on that resolution mode that you select. One thing that is cool about the Red Komodo is the fact that it has an RF mount on it. That allows for the use of all sorts of adapters and even speed boosters that can essentially take you to the full frame or Vista Vision sensor realm. You can use EFS crop sensor lenses, Super 35 PL glass, or full frame lenses all on this bad boy. As of recording this video, Red suggests that you use the Canon RF to EF adapter and use only EF lenses, but soon an update with RF support should come. The Komodo has a brand new 6K Super 35 global shutter sensor that retains a high dynamic range while delivering the Red look without compromising on any of the technical features that you would come to expect from Red cameras. Now, global shutter, let's talk about it. This is a big deal and something that many people potentially overlook about this camera. Basically, the global shutter exposes all of the sensor's pixels in each frame simultaneously, unlike a rolling shutter that exposes lines of pixels each with a delay, causing image artifacts on fast-moving objects. Most cameras, even including the Arri Alexa, have a rolling shutter, so the addition of this global shutter is going to be huge in the indie filmmaking world. The YouTuber crowd has never seen anything like this, so those high-end content creators out there dealing with a lot of shaky footage are going to love this sensor. Imagine vlogging with a global shutter. Who would do such a thing? Can you vlog on a Red Komodo? The answer is absolutely. In all seriousness though, post-production houses will rejoice because this camera is perfect for gimbal or drone use, as well as crash cams and car mounts, all of which have incredibly shaky situations. The biggest achievement from Red is the fact that we're getting great dynamic range and good ISO performance on this thing, which are usually the downsides of using a global shutter in the past. Speaking of dynamic range, what about dynamic range and noise performance? Well, for a cinema camera, this thing is right in line with the competition, it seems. Red hasn't actually officially announced the dynamic range specs, and I don't have an official dynamic range chart, so we'll have to wait on official specs to give you that spec. I can tell you though, using the R3D and color grading using the IPP2 color space feels totally like any other Red camera. We compared it to the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 4K and 6K and found them both to hold up well against the Komodo. So take that with a grain of salt because obviously this is not a scientific test by any means, but it does seem to perform in that 13 to 15 stop dynamic range kind of world. So again, don't take my word for it. It's not official, not yet. In terms of low light performance and ISO noise, Red has not told us the actual native ISO yet, but a lot of users are saying that 800 is kind of its sweet spot, and I found that to be true here. And I found that if I needed to go down to 400 or even 200 ISO, it looked clean, it looked good. And if I need to go up a little bit, hitting around 1600 is kind of as far as you would want to go. The Komodo can record in both RAW and ProRes to CFast 2.0 cards. RAW data is recorded independently of any RGB domain color processing such as ISO, white balance, or other RGB color space settings. Basically, it means you can essentially change your white balance and ISO in post. Now, the Komodo isn't like other Red cameras when it comes to the RAW recording. You only get HQ and MQ settings. All Red has told us is that the high quality mode is for VFX and extreme detail scenes, and for non-VFX TV or online content, medium quality is what they recommend. Now, if RAW isn't your thing and you just don't have the storage space or the time to deal with RAW recording, you can shoot in ProRes on this camera. You can shoot in the standard 422 mode or the 422 HQ. You can choose to shoot in log or bake it in by using a LUT to mix cool LUTs into your footage, and then it's just ready to go, straight out of camera. You can only shoot at a maximum of 4K in ProRes mode, and you cannot record ProRes and RAW simultaneously, unfortunately, so you'll need an external recorder if you do need both. Now, in the 4K mode, you're actually using the full 6K width of the sensor, and it's downsampling that to 4K. So if you're only needing a 4K delivery and you don't want to shoot in 6K, ProRes and shooting log in the HQ mode could actually be just as good, if not better, for your situation. 6K at 40 frames per second is really where it's at. And if you're cool with that widescreen look, you can do up to 50 frames per second, which is perfect for those music videos where you overcrank to 48 frames per second and then slow it down to 24. You know, those music videos where like the artist is singing in slow motion the whole time. 4K at 60 frames per second and 2K at 120 frames per second. Again, there is a serious crop on these, which could hurt you or help you depending on your situations. Image quality looks pretty good in all modes, but you will start to see some noise in the lower resolution settings. If it were up to me, like most Reds, I would recommend staying in the full sensor setting. 6K at 17:9 at 40 frames per second, or if you can deal with that 2:4:1 aspect ratio, 50 frames per second. This camera is equipped with phase detect autofocus. The autofocus performance on this camera is not bad at all. There's two modes, a single autofocus and a continuous autofocus mode. In the single autofocus mode, you can either tap the screen on the camera or your mobile phone screen using the Red app, and then it locks to that exact point that you touch to, and it doesn't move. This is great for a simple behind the desk kind of talking head scenario, similar to what a lot of YouTubers would use. The continuous autofocus mode was surprisingly good in decent lighting scenarios. In my testing, I found continuous autofocus to perform better than a Panasonic camera, which may not be saying a lot because Panasonic gets kind of a bad rap for their autofocus. I really hope that Red continues to upgrade this technology through firmware updates, and that it gets to a point where you can really rely on this and maybe even have some tracking features with the continuous autofocus. Because this camera only weighs 2 pounds without stuff on it, that makes it the perfect gimbal camera. Having the ability to have reliable autofocus on a gimbal would be really nice, but for now, just tapping the display quickly and having the subject locked on is all I'm really asking for. It doesn't have to have super reliable autofocus right now, so use it at your own discretion. Overheating! This is a hot topic right now, but we did do a basic test here with the overheating and had the camera run continuously for over an hour and had no issues with overheating, as you'd expect from a proper cinema camera with a fan built inside of it. The media was super hot to the touch, and the camera even warned me to not touch the CFast card, so make sure that you're careful with that if you are truly running a non-stop media situation. Also, in hot environments, you may have overheating issues, but based on our test, doesn't seem like that'll be a serious issue, unlike like other camera companies out there. Let's talk accessories and I/O. First off, this is a first for Red, we have two Canon BP900 series battery mounts on the back of this camera. These batteries can actually be hot swapped, and Red recommends only using either the BP955 or the BP975 from Canon. They're scaring us to buy Canon cameras. RF mount, dual pixel autofocus, Canon batteries. Is Red in cahoots with Canon? Wooden Camera is making a really clever accessory that slots into the battery packs on the back of the Komodo, and it turns it into basically a V-mount battery solution. So if you're interested in picking that up, we've linked it down below. Like mentioned at the beginning of this video, this camera comes equipped with an active RF mount. This is the newest lens mount from Canon, and it allows you to use a ton of different adapters. We've also got power out, SDI out, and the EXT cable is for the extension port that gives you GPI, timecode, and external RS-232 connections. On the side of the camera, you get a mic input and a headphone out jack, but there are two built-in mics on the front if you only need scratch audio. This is a test using the external microphone, the Deity D3 Pro, plugged into the mic jack. And now this is a test of the internal microphone on the Red Komodo. How does this sound? About an arm's length from the camera. And I think this is a very typical setup for a lot of content creators out there. So how does this sound? It's probably good enough for some sort of scratch audio source, but probably nothing else. For most people, what the camera has built into it is really great, but for some of you, you might have liked having HDMI instead of SDI, but personally, I prefer SDI. It's a much more sturdy connection and it's more reliable for most shooting situations. Small HT has a great SDI focus monitor that is really lightweight and affordable, as well as a touchscreen monitor that can actually control the camera itself. We've again linked all the things that I'm listing in the description below if you're interested in learning more about those monitors. On the side, you got an on-off switch and the record button. It's kind of a weird placement for the record button, but it's nice and out of the way to prevent accidental presses. On that same side, you also have a little Wi-Fi antenna that allows you to use the app, which is pretty cool. And lastly, on the top of the camera, you got a little touch screen, and it's a very simplified layout, really intuitive and easy to use. Overall, the Red Komodo is honestly one of my favorite cameras on the market right now. It really checks all the boxes for me as a content creator of what I need in a true video cinema camera package. It's small, lightweight, relatively affordable, uses standard equipment like Canon batteries, CFast card readers, and an SDI output, as well as a very versatile lens mount with the RF mount system from Canon. It also has decent autofocus for now and will potentially get better with time, and most importantly, the visuals that you can capture on this camera are truly cinematic and epic. And that global shutter is really the cherry on top for me when it comes to the Red Komodo, because once you see that global shutter image quality and the lack of that wobble going on, it's hard to go back to a rolling shutter. There's really nothing about the Red Komodo that's disappointing to me other than the price point. I wish the camera was around $4,000 to $5,000 instead of $6,000, but I understand there's a little bit of a red tax involved here. I know it's superficial, but on a set, a red logo will actually go further than a Blackmagic or Zcam logo. That's just a fact. You know what else is a fact? It's a fact that Squarespace is the best place to go to get your custom website or domain. You can easily create your own custom website by using one of the many different templates provided by Squarespace. You may already have a domain name, but if you don't, Squarespace will actually provide one with your subscription. You can link all your social media accounts onto your website as well, making your website the hub of your online presence. If you're a content creator out there and you don't have a personal website, we highly recommend that you check out Squarespace by using the first link in the description below. If you use our link, you'll actually save 10% off your first purchase. We'd like to thank Squarespace again for sponsoring this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed my first review here on the Indy Mogul set. It was a real pleasure for me to do this, and I'm happy to be a part of this team. I want to thank all of you who have followed me over here to Indy Mogul from the Kinotika YouTube channel. All of you guys mean so much to me. Once again, I'm your host, Dave Mays. This is Indy Mogul, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.